In the original story of Peter Pan, Peter murders members of the Lost Boys when they grow too old. He did this because being an adult was against the rules in Neverland. In the middle of battles with pirates, Peter would also switch sides to kill members of the Lost Boys just for fun. Up until the 1800s, Turkish women who were accused of cheating on their husbands were tied up in a sack filled with cats, then thrown in the ocean. In 1977, 20-year-old Colleen Stan was kidnapped while hitchhiking in California. She was locked in a box the size of a coffin under her kidnapper's bed for 7 years. She had to lie still and couldn't make any noise for 23 hours a day in pitch black darkness. Her kidnapper was only caught when his wife finally reported him to police. There's a surgery so incredibly bizarre that's called tooth and eye surgery, known medically as osteoodontokeratoprosthesis. It's a last resort operation for people with severe corneal blindness. Surgeons remove one of the patient's canine teeth, root and jawbone included, hollow it out, and fit it with a tiny plastic lens. The bizarre implant is first stitched underneath the skin of the cheek for months, where it swells, fuses with flesh, and even grows its own blood supply before it's transplanted into the blind eye. Surgeons describe the moment of implantation as one of the most surreal in medicine, sliding a blood-soaked tooth back out of the cheek and into the empty cornea. The body is far less likely to reject the implant if it's made from the patient's own living tissue, making a tooth the ideal durable anchor. The result is an unsettling image, a tooth visibly embedded in the white of the eye with a lens peeking through like a peephole. But it's restored vision to people thought to be permanently blind, sometimes after decades in darkness. On Thanksgiving Day in 1980, Priscilla Ford steered her Lincoln Continental onto a crowded Reno sidewalk, mowing down dozens of pedestrians because she claimed a voice in her head told her to, killing 6 people and injuring 23 more in the chaos. Later diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, she showed no remorse in court, and though initially sentenced to death, her punishment was reduced to life in prison. Ford spent the next 25 years behind bars before dying there in 2005. In 2019, an obese wheelchair-bound American passenger on an EVA air flight from Los Angeles to Taiwan totally humiliated the crew by demanding help in the restroom, then forcing a female flight attendant to wipe him after absolutely nuking the toilet. With the door open, he allegedly moaned in pleasure and urged her on, saying, "Deeper, deeper," while she carried out the degrading task. The incident sparked outrage in Taiwan, led to a fine against EVA Air for failing to protect its staff, and left the attendant in tears as she described the ordeal at a press conference. YouTuber Benjamin Bennett built a cult following with his eerie project Sitting and Smiling. Hundreds of 4-hour videos where he sits cross-legged, staring at the camera with a fixed grin, never moving or speaking. What starts as harmless quickly turns unsettling, the smile morphing into something more of a mask. His commitment over the years has produced some rather disturbing moments. In one recording, someone apparently tries to break into his home, but Bennett continues to grin without moving, sending the intruder fleeing in fear. In another, he loses control of his bladder midstream but still doesn't break character, letting the accident happen as though it were irrelevant to the ritual. In perhaps the most disturbing case, he allegedly kept filming while his grandmother lay dying in the next room, the fixed smile never faltering even as tragedy was unfolding in his own home. He's never once broken character or explained why he does this, leaving behind thousands of hours of unsettling footage that's disturbed viewers online for years. China's developing a humanoid robot that can carry a fetus in an artificial womb, where the baby would float in synthetic fluid, sustained by nutrient tubes and monitored by sensors, before being expelled by hydraulics at birth. The first prototype is planned for 2026, priced around $14,000, and will give people the chance to have children without enduring the risks or pain of pregnancy. Supporters argue it could help women who can't safely carry babies, but critics warn it strips away the human bond of gestation and could mark the beginning of childbirth being outsourced to machines. In 1988, Clarence Moses L. was sentenced to 48 years in prison after a rape victim told police that she saw his face in a dream and decided that he was the attacker. No physical evidence tied him to the crime, and police even destroyed the DNA that could have proven his innocence. For nearly 3 decades, he sat behind bars while the real rapist walked free until that man finally confessed. But by then, Clarence had already lost 28 years of his life to a conviction built on nothing more than a dream. These are the faces of 2 brothers who thought that murdering their family would make them famous. Morbid Facts, Part 727. In 2015, brothers Robert and Michael Bever turned their quiet Oklahoma home into a slaughterhouse. Armed with knives and body armor, the teens butchered their parents and 3 siblings in a planned midnight massacre, leaving only 2 sisters alive, one gravely wounded, the other just 2 years old and deliberately spared. Investigators later revealed the brothers weren't driven by family conflict, but by a twisted obsession with mass murder. They idolized the Columbine shooters, stockpiled weapons, and even kept journals outlining a plan to kill hundreds more once their family was out of the way, dreaming of becoming legends of infamy. The carnage only ended when the injured sister managed to call 911, bringing police to a scene so gruesome it was described as the stuff of nightmares. A couple years later, Robert was sentenced to life without parole, while Michael received life with a chance of parole after 38 years. In 1941, Soviet archaeologists wanted to open up the tomb of Timur, aka Tamerlane. He was a Turco-Mongol conqueror from the 14th century who is often regarded as one of the greatest military leaders of all time. However, locals urged the Soviets not to do so since it was believed that opening the tomb would curse the world. This was mainly due to the inscription on his tomb which read, "When I rise from the dead, the world shall tremble." And inside his casket, there was another mysterious note that read, "Whoever disturbs my tomb will unleash an invader more terrible than I." But despite the warnings, Joseph Stalin ordered for Tamerlane's body to be exhumed. Just 3 days later, Adolf Hitler launched Operation Barbarossa and invaded the Soviet Union. Extra Morbid Facts, Part 8. In 2018, Tyrone Johnson snapped during a fight with his girlfriend Stephanie Willis after she allegedly mocked him over his son's suicide. He shot her in the bedroom, then hunted down her 10-year-old son Ricky, who was hiding under his bed. The boy's room became a scene of horror, with toys scattered, shell casings on the floor, and blood pooling from beneath his bed. In 2022, Johnson was sentenced to death for the killings. In October of 2024, a 67-year-old man from Arkansas was awaiting trial for disgusting crimes against a 14-year-old girl. Despite a no-contact order, he allegedly continued to pursue her, and one night the girl's father discovered her inside a vehicle with him. In the heat of that confrontation, the father pulled out a gun and fatally shot the predator right in front of his daughter. He's since been charged with first-degree murder. At the height of his YouTube and FaZe Clan fame, Norden Chat, aka FaZe Rain, spiraled into a drug addiction so destructive that millions of fans watched him unravel in real time. What began with casually showing off painkillers to his audience escalated to him swallowing alarming amounts of pills on stream, bragging about it while his body silently deteriorated. By 2020, Rain was suffering seizures, collapsing, and eventually lost the ability to walk. Doctors warned the nerve damage in his legs might be permanent, leaving him in a wheelchair and forcing him into grueling therapy. His addiction wrecked friendships, destroyed his career, and turned a gaming star into a cautionary tale as fans saw him posting from hospital beds and fighting through constant pain. But after years of setbacks and near-death lows, he finally clawed his way back to sobriety. Rain can now walk again, is slowly attempting to rebuild his career, and now shares his harrowing story as a warning about how fast addiction can take everything. Patrice O'Neal was a renowned stand-up comedian known for his sharp, unfiltered style on stage and appearances on Chappelle's Show, Opie and Anthony, and the Comedy Central roasts. He first discovered he had diabetes after a girlfriend told him his urine tasted like birthday cake, prompting him to get tested. The disease slowly wore him down over the years until in October of 2011, he suffered a massive stroke. Just a month later, at 41 years old, he died from complications, with his final television appearance being the roast of Charlie Sheen. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, the heat was so intense it didn't just kill people. It completely warped human remains in ways rarely seen throughout history. In Herculaneum, archaeologists discovered the body of a young man lying face down on a wooden bed whose brain had literally been turned into glass. What you're looking at in this photo is brain tissue that was flash heated to nearly 1,000 degrees before cooling so rapidly it vitrified, leaving behind a shiny glass-like substance. It remains one of the only known cases of a human brain preserved through such a gruesome transformation. If Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin got stuck on the moon, the official policy was to cut off communication and let them slowly suffocate in silence. President Nixon even had a speech prepared in case this happened. The speech read, quote, "Fate has ordained that the men who went to the moon to explore in peace will stay on the moon to rest in peace." Actor Bela Lugosi famously played Count Dracula in the 1931 film. As per his request, he was dressed in vampire clothing during his open casket funeral in 1956. Chad Vera was a priest who started the very first suicide hotline in 1953. He decided to start it after directing a funeral for a girl who took her own life when she had her first period. She believed she had contracted an STD and had no one to talk to reassure her. In 2008, 23-year-old Rachel Hoffman was arrested for possession of marijuana and was facing 4 years in prison. Police told her that the only way to get out of the prison time was to become a confidential informant. She agreed, and her first undercover drug purchase would have been one of the biggest in Florida history. Police told her to buy 1,500 pills as well as a gun from some drug dealers. But the dealers found a wire in her purse and she was murdered with the gun that she was buying. Before World War II, Janusz Korczak ran an orphanage in Warsaw, Poland. During the Holocaust, Nazi soldiers came to his orphanage to take all 192 children to an extermination camp. Korczak was offered his freedom but refused to abandon the children. Instead, he boarded the train with them and was never seen nor heard from again. After retiring from the NFL in 1990, Hall of Famer Mike Webster's life unraveled into a spiral of bizarre and disturbing behavior. Once celebrated as the Iron Man of the Pittsburgh Steelers, he spent his final years homeless or sleeping in his pickup truck, suffering crushing headaches, dementia, and paranoia. Friends and family later described shocking habits: urinating in his own oven, shocking himself with a taser just to fall asleep, and gluing his decaying teeth back together. At one point, he even carried around a briefcase filled with superglue, painkillers, and duct tape, using them as makeshift tools to hold his broken body together. By the time he died of a heart attack in 2002 at just 50 years old, Webster's decline had become a cautionary tale of the hidden costs of football. When doctors examined his brain, they discovered the first confirmed case of CTE in an NFL player, proof of how the game had slowly destroyed him from the inside out. In 2009, a Russian man named Artyom Sidorkin went to the doctors suspecting something wrong with his lungs. Initially, doctors thought they were dealing with a tumor, but it ended up being something they had never seen before. It turned out that years ago he inhaled the seed of a fir tree and it started growing inside of him. Pigs have been known to feast on just about anything. There are even stories of pigs breaking into farmhouses and eating newborn babies. The ship that inspired the story of Moby Dick was named the Essex. After being shipwrecked by a sperm whale, the crew avoided stepping foot on surrounding islands out of fear of cannibals. But because of this bypass, the men soon ran out of food and were forced to eat each other for survival. Author of Frankenstein, Mary Shelley, is said to have lost her virginity on top of her mother's grave. She also kept her dead husband's heart and carried it around for 30 years until her death in 1851. In North Korea, viewing or selling porn is strictly forbidden and is said to be punishable by death. If you win the lottery, you're about 20 times more likely to be murdered than the average person. In 2016, a seemingly abandoned yacht drifted towards some fishermen off the coast of the Philippines. But when they boarded the ship, they found the mummified remains of a German man who had been missing for 7 years. To this day, the man's cause of death remains a mystery. As horrible as the Holocaust was, one man truly stood out as one of the most evil of all Nazis involved. Dr. Joseph Mengele was tasked with conducting genetic research on human subjects at Auschwitz concentration camp. His work focused primarily on twins, with very little regard for the safety or suffering of his patients. Some of his horrific experiments included removing organs without anesthesia, injecting toxic dye into eyeballs, and even sewing twins together at the skin. Most of his patients ended up dying after these operations, but those who didn't often wish they had. What's perhaps most disturbing is that after the Holocaust, Dr. Mengele escaped to South America, where many say he continued his brutal experiments in a less organized manner. He lived for more than 30 years after the end of the war and died on a beach in Brazil. Morbid Facts, Part 726. Here's a photo of two tourists posing inside the Claw of Death at Chernobyl, a massive crane used to scoop up chunks of radioactive reactor core after the 1986 meltdown. The machine is still so contaminated that standing near it can deliver radiation doses dozens of times higher than a chest X-ray. and its rusted frame is coated in radioactive dust that can cling to hair, skin, or clothing. While a brief picture likely won't cause immediate sickness, the exposure adds to long-term cancer risk, and any contamination they brought home could be far deadlier. It remains one of the most dangerously toxic relics of the exclusion zone, yet people still climb inside it for a photo op. In 2000, a Tahitian man named Fidel Maruhi pulled off one of the most unlikely survivals in aviation history. He stowed away in the wheel well of a Boeing 747 bound for Los Angeles. For 7.5 hours, he endured sub-zero temperatures and near total lack of oxygen, and when rescuers found him, his core body temperature was just 79 degrees Fahrenheit, a level usually considered fatal. But against all odds, he lived, and when asked why he'd risk such a death-defying stunt, he explained his dream was to reach France simply so he could shake hands with soccer legend Zinedine Zidane. For millions of children in the 1990s, Barney the dinosaur embodied love and innocence. But the man inside the costume, David Joyner, went down a radically different path after leaving the show. Joyner reinvented himself as a tantric sex therapist, charging clients $350 for 3 to 4 hour energy sessions that involved ritual baths, meditation, and full sexual contact. He openly admitted that helping women reach orgasm was part of his practice, describing it as a way to release blocked energy. In interviews, Joyner even gave credit to his years as Barney for preparing him for this role, saying the same ability to project love in a purple dinosaur suit helped him guide clients through intimate spiritual healing. Mike Tyson has openly admitted that he often had sex shortly before his fights, sometimes immediately before stepping into the ring. He explained he would bang groupies in the bathrooms and locker rooms to calm him down and apparently prevent him from murdering his opponent during the fight. At the 2004 Athens Olympics, organizers handed out 130,000 free condoms to athletes, but the supply ran out within days, forcing a rush order of 20,000 more. That record was shattered in Rio 2016, where a staggering 450,000 condoms were distributed within just 2 weeks, cementing the Olympic Games' reputation as the world's biggest orgy. In 2017, a billionaire from Brazil announced that he was gonna bury his Bentley for his afterlife. After receiving a lot of online hate for his wasteful decision, he revealed that it was simply a publicity stunt for organ donations. He said people bury things that are much more valuable than cars and nobody seems to care. Patty Mallet became pregnant at age 17 and was pressured by multiple people to abort the baby, but she refused. That baby was Justin Bieber. The Titanic fired 8 emergency flares before it sank. A ship in the area saw the flares and that the boat looked uneven in the water. But the captain didn't believe that the rockets were fired in distress, so he didn't take action. If he had, all of the Titanic's passengers could have been rescued, but instead help didn't arrive for more than 2 hours. In 1984, comedian Tommy Cooper died of a heart attack while performing live on stage. Thinking it was all part of the show, the audience continued to laugh and clap as the man was gasping for air. In 1300 BC, Egyptian King Meneptah defeated the Libyans in battle. To prove of his triumph, he brought back 6,000 tan bananas that he cut off of opposing soldiers. When a very tall man dies and can't afford a custom coffin, the undertaker will often chop off his feet and place them beside his legs. The family doesn't notice because only the top half of the coffin is open during the funeral. In 2015, a woman claimed that she could smell Parkinson's disease. To test this, doctors gave her 12 shirts to smell and 6 of them were from Parkinson's patients. She correctly identified the 6 shirts but also chose one from the control group. 8 months later, that person was diagnosed with Parkinson's. Amid the darkest day in modern history, these are the miracles of 9/11 that still leave people speechless. After nearly 27 hours buried under debris, Janelle Guzman McMillan, an office worker in the North Tower, was the last person rescued alive from Ground Zero. Pinned under concrete with only a single hand free, she said she felt someone holding it and telling her that she would be okay. When rescuers finally pulled her out, they all swore that none of them had touched her hand. In the North Tower's Stairwell B, a group of 16 firefighters, a police officer, and a civilian survived the entire collapse, entombed in a concrete pocket while everything around them was pulverized. They were dug out hours later still alive in what rescuers called a miracle. One survivor, Stanley Premnath, was literally looking at the nose of Flight 175 as it struck the South Tower. His office was completely shredded, but he survived by diving under his desk. He was later pulled from the rubble by another worker, both escaping down the stairwell before the building collapsed. A Port Authority worker named Pasquale Buzelli was on the 22nd floor of the North Tower when it suddenly collapsed beneath him. But instead of being crushed, he was carried down with the debris, riding it like a wave. He woke up hours later on top of a pile of rubble with only a broken ankle, later nicknamed the 9/11 Surfer. A guide dog named Roselle led a group of people, including her blind owner, down 78 flights of stairs before the North Tower collapsed. She stopped only once to give kisses to a woman who was having a panic attack. This is a comparison of a pug in 1880 versus what the breed looks like today. The pug was selectively bred to feature an extremely flat face, which has contributed to severe breathing difficulties as well as eye problems in many of these dogs. If a person dies on a plane during a flight, their body is typically moved to an empty first-class seat until the plane lands. After the Titanic disaster, the U.S. Congress passed a law requiring passenger vessels to carry more lifeboats. But the added weight made one ship called the SS Eastland too top-heavy. In 1915, the ship capsized before even leaving the dock, killing 844 people. When Ben Franklin's London home was renovated in 1998, 15 human bodies, including 6 children, were discovered in the basement. Archaeologists agree that they were buried at the same time Franklin had been living in the home. While police initially thought it was the work of a serial killer, the bodies were likely stolen by his friend William Hewson so that he could study anatomy. When Joseph Stalin was dying, his private physician was not available. This is because he was already being tortured in the KGB headquarters for suggesting that Stalin get more bed rest. A Thai woman once accidentally slipped on mud, grabbed a naked live wire, and was electrocuted to death. After the funeral, her sister was showing her neighbors how the accident happened. Suddenly, she herself slipped, grabbed the same live wire, and was also electrocuted to death. In 1978, San Francisco was left shaken when disgruntled former city supervisor Dan White snuck into City Hall through a basement window and gunned down Mayor George Moscone and Supervisor Harvey Milk in cold blood. At trial, prosecutors expected an easy murder conviction, but White's lawyers argued that he was deeply depressed, pointing to drastic lifestyle changes, including a diet of sugary junk food like Twinkies, as proof of his unraveling mental state. The bizarre argument, later mocked as the Twinkie defense, convinced jurors to downgrade his charges from murder to voluntary manslaughter. White was sentenced to just over 7 years, but walked free after barely serving 5. The shocking leniency sparked outrage across San Francisco, fueling the violent White Night riots and leaving the city completely haunted by the fact that the man who assassinated both its mayor and his supervisor spent less time in prison than many would serve for petty crimes. In 2007, NASA astronaut Lisa Nowak made headlines for one of the strangest scandals in space history. Obsessed with her ex-boyfriend's new partner, Lisa drove 900 miles from Houston to Orlando in a single stretch, allegedly wearing adult diapers so she wouldn't have to stop for the bathroom. In her car, police found a BB gun, a knife, pepper spray, rubber tubing, and trash bags, tools suggesting a plan to kidnap. She ambushed Colleen Shipman in an airport parking lot, spraying her with mace before being arrested. Once a respected astronaut who had flown on the Space Shuttle Discovery, Nowak became infamous as the first NASA astronaut ever fired after the bizarre meltdown. In 2009, she managed to avoid jail time, receiving a year of probation and community service. This disturbing sign was recently put up at a cemetery in Tampa Bay. In January of 2004, Texas math teacher Alejandro Navarro checked into the ER with serious heart and kidney problems, knowing he might not make it out. But instead of resting, he pulled out his laptop and started grading papers, determined to finish his students' work even as doctors prepared him for critical care. The next day, Navarro tragically passed away, and the photo his daughter shared of him bent over his computer in the hospital went viral. She waited 63 years for the love of her life to return home. In 1950, U.S. Army Sergeant Joseph Gant went missing during the Korean War, and his wife Clara was told only that he may have been taken prisoner. Refusing to give up hope, she never remarried and kept a light burning on her porch for more than 6 decades, telling everyone she was still waiting for Joe. Finally, in 2013, his remains were identified and returned to Los Angeles in a flag-draped coffin. At 94 years old, Clara stood weeping as she welcomed him home, her lifelong vigil ending in both heartbreak and closure. This was the last photo taken of 31-year-old Landre Sylvester in July of 2021, as he walked out of Cook County Jail after posting bail, unaware it would be his final steps. Just minutes after his release, multiple gunmen leaped from 2 cars and opened fire in a calculated ambush, riddling his body with up to 64 bullets in front of stunned witnesses. Police noted Sylvester's ties to local gangs, and many believe the hit was gang-related retaliation, but with no arrests ever made, the case remains officially unsolved. In 2005, 8-year-old Shasta Groen survived one of the most disturbing child abduction cases in U.S. history. A convicted predator invaded her family's rural Idaho home, killing her mother, older brother, and her mother's boyfriend before kidnapping Shasta and her 9-year-old brother Dylan. For nearly 7 weeks, the children were held in the Montana wilderness, where Shasta endured unimaginable abuse and was forced to witness Dylan's murder. She was finally rescued when staff at Denny's recognized her from missing child alerts and contacted police, leading to her captor's arrest. While the man responsible eventually died in prison, he left behind some chilling words, claiming that Shasta had taught him how to love, a grotesque attempt to justify his heinous crimes. The trauma he inflicted left Shasta struggling for years with grief, addiction, and survivor's guilt, and as a young adult, she cycled in and out of jail on charges related to substance abuse and theft. In recent years, she's fought to reclaim her life, becoming a mother and speaking out about the ordeal, but fresh tragedies continue to haunt her, most recently losing her home and treasured family keepsakes in a fire, perpetuating her ongoing battle against the shadows of her past.